Hi. After only one term, I was invited to move to a nearby school that was actually introducing A-level. I was invited to teach their A-level English course, and things changed quite dramatically. I was no longer sort of surrounded by Salvation Army people. I was surrounded by ex-combatants, many of whom were students, and my oldest student was only 2 years younger than me, me being 37 at the time. Anyways, this part is about bride price. Money, something that never existed in rural Africa prior to the arrival of the colonists, quickly became an essential and intrusive ingredient in contemporary life once it had been introduced. I was aware that I was a cog in the modern industrial machine driving students towards success and careers so that they could earn a salary and support an extended family in this new and unfamiliar world. These values clashed heavily with those of the rural areas where life tried to continue much in the same way as it always had, evolving over hundreds of years based on survival, knowledge of local conditions, and a close relationship to the nature, the natural cycles of the seasons. Money undoubtedly is an enabler of the transaction of goods and services. It is also true to say that money is the root of all evil. It does enable people to acquire an education for their children, but it also means that money is needed to pay for the school fees. In order to raise money, farmers needed to grow cash crops as well as their own food. In some areas of Africa, families are starving because they have given over all their land to produce cash crops to the exclusion of food crops, hoping to become wealthy. Whole regions end up with insufficient food crops to feed the people, and they are forced to import expensive foods from other countries. Money has also undermined traditional values at a very fundamental level. I had been introduced to the issue of lobola, or bride price, early in my days at Bradley. The discussion over coffee at recess had brought on the topic to my attention, and it was Captain Carlson, the combi driver and math teacher, who rattled off a list of how the current education system was serving to rank the value of the girls as they progressed through the system. A girl with just primary education who can read and knows how to handle numbers might be worth a cow. If she passes her ZJC exams in Form 2, she will have enough education to be employable, so she is worth 2 cows. If she passes at least some of her Cambridge exams, her parents will have spent a lot of money on raising her, so she will be more expensive and also have a better chance of getting paid employment and perhaps want to have a career in a bank. She will fetch at least 3 cows. However, the one who gets A-levels and gets into college can cost as much as 8 cattle. Of course, they mostly use the money now instead, as it's a lot easier. Handing over cash requires a lot less effort than rounding up 8 acceptable cattle and transporting them to the property of the girl's parents. However, money tends to benefit the male members only, whereas the cattle would benefit the entire family. This didn't seem to be quite fair, so I asked her to expand on the point. Quite often, a man will take the money and buy clothes for himself or something that he has always wanted, as now suddenly he has cash to do so. It will be very tempting, don't you think? And who doesn't give in to temptation once in a while? Once the money is spent, it is gone. Sometimes it all vanishes at the bar and the family ends up with no money and many drunken brawls. The old ways were definitely better. When I raised the issue at Bradley in the next Friday Current Affairs class, I was struck by the hearty defense of the concept of both bride price and polygamy. A boy who cannot respect my parents for raising me, Precious said, will not respect me either. Who would want such a person to spend the rest of your life with, eh? But that is right, chimed in Blessings, as well. It may be very lonely for a wife to have to raise her children alone. If her husband has other wives, then everyone cares for the children at the same time. They help each other, especially if a man goes to work in the city. Noah, assisted by the promptings and numerous interruptions of the girls in the class, explains that in the past, if a young man will see a certain young lady and he might like to spend his days with, and then he must meet with her auntie. He cannot go directly to her parents, and before that, he must also have the permission of his father. He will ask the auntie if she thinks that Precious might be might like him, and she will understand what she is being asked. The whole class noticed that he was getting confused between his wishes and his desire at this point. He and Precious had been friends for some time. Now Auntie will know the family of the young man, and if she thinks well of them, she will go to her brother and say, Precious is looking very ripe these days, and that is time for her to think about getting married. Don't you agree, my brother? The father will ask if she has somebody in mind, and then she tells the father about a certain young man she knows. If the father accepts this, then the young man would come to live with the family, and after he has built a hut for Precious, he will try to make babies with her during the night. Her auntie will have taught her how to do that. During the days, the young man must clear an acre of land, plow it, grow crops, and then harvest it. In that way, the parents can see that he will be a good provider for their daughter. As well, the young woman will be able to show that she is able to have babies too. In the end, if everything works out well, then the father of Precious will meet the parents of the young man, and they will discuss about how many cattle the parents must pay for Precious. They have raised her, and then she becomes the daughter of the man's mother, so they must pay for her. I began to understand the adage, it takes a whole village to raise a child. The truth of the matter is that many villages are made up of a child's relatives, especially if a man has more than one wife. It is almost impossible for a child to misbehave without word of his misdeeds reaching the parents' ears within a very short time. The same is definitely true if a young couple is secretly courting. The lack of a social safety net in developing countries, as I discovered, is a mixed blessing. In so-called developed states, taxpayers provide financial assistance to the unemployed. There are pensions for the elderly, and there is a host of social agencies to provide assistance to the distressed. Much of this is good, though it can be soulless and impersonal, which is the very opposite of the way things work in Africa. People in Zimbabwe were often introducing their ideas to me with the phrase, in our culture. In Shona culture, large extended families look after families in distress with varying degrees of success. Women become very vulnerable should they have the misfortune of coming into conflict with their husband, or worse, becoming widowed. The very lobola that had helped create such a rigorous screening of the prospective groom could then become the very chains that hold the helpless woman captive. Widows are frequently thrown out of their family homes and lose their children, which means that they are also losing their only support in their old age. In the case of developing alcohol addiction and spousal abuse by the husband, many women are simply ignored by their families. For a woman to leave her husband means that the parents would have to return the money or cattle that the groom's parents had paid for her. This would usually inflict financial hardship on the parents and brothers. As well as returning the bride price, they would also have more mouths to feed and school fees to find, and among the poor, this is often too overwhelming to contemplate. In pre-colonial times, before buses transported people hundreds of miles away from parental protection, and before there were cities, families would have intervened in such cases. The husbands would have faced public retribution if they continued to mistreat their wives. Brothers would have confronted the abuser, and oftentimes issues would be resolved. I was not When I left Bradley, Elijah and I had become good friends, and he asked me to borrow $600, and I wasn't sure that I would actually ever see the money again, but he did come and see me at Chindanduma with the money. And I was amazed, and I said, well, I'd love to go and see your family. And he said, sorry, not possible just at the moment. Now is not a good time, Mr. G. Elijah seemed pleased that I had expressed interest in visiting his home area, but he looked troubled. It is my sister. She is not well. Perhaps you can come at a later date. It was disappointing, as I was interested in visiting a real family outside the school compound. I also wanted to meet the family that had produced this industrious and intelligent young man. Maybe some other time, I suggested, and the matter was dropped. Another year passed, and then a letter arrived. Dear sir, how is my father? I hope this letter finds you well. The rains were good this year, and my father has had another excellent harvest. He saved seeds from last year's crop, so he owes you 2 good harvests. He is a very good farmer. I am pleased to tell you that my sister has recovered now. Perhaps you will not understand this, but in our culture, our ancestors can do things that can cause great problems. My sister was cursed by my grandmother, who is deceased. She did not mean to do it, but my uncle had visited a traditional doctor and deflected the curse onto my sister. As you know, my father has 2 wives. My mother has 3 children, and the second wife has 2. All 3 of my mother's children have done very well in school. My brother is a mechanic. My little sister was getting good marks too before she became ill, and I am in college. My 2 stepbrothers were very troublesome, and neither of them stayed in school. This has made their mother very jealous. She also had an affair with my father's younger brother. My grandmother must have seen this because my uncle became very ill. When he visited the traditional healer, he was told that he had been cursed, so he paid the healer money and some chickens to deflect the curse. That is why my sister became ill when I last visited you. My father went to an honest healer, and he discovered the cause of the problem. Miss Nanga talked with my grandmother, who was distressed by the turn of events, and so the relationship between my uncle and my stepmother was discovered. The healer threatened both of them, so my uncle has had to pay 3 cows to my father in compensation for his second wife, and another to the healer for lifting the curse from my sister and sending it away. That is why I could not invite you to visit my family the last time we were together. I hope your mother is well, and I am looking forward to seeing you again soon. Your son, Elijah.